everybody, Zach again, NewTorah.com, coming in, making a video for you today. Usually how this goes is once you've learned some of the more interesting or obvious aspects of Torah, things like the Shabbat, the dietary laws, the feast days that you see over and over again, the disciples and Paul keeping even after the resurrection in the New Testament, you begin to look at some of the more interesting aspects of Torah, and Leviticus 25 comes up, you know, in the Shemitah year, the year of rest for the land. And people, even in the last few videos, I've had a number of comments saying, Zach, this is coming up. How do I keep the Shemitah? How do I keep the year of rest? How do I do this? Do you have any videos on this? And I do have videos on it, but I figured I might as well do another one because it comes up so often, especially when certain ministries out there are saying that this is the year of the Shemitah, you must rest the land. And people, well, how do I do that? How does this apply to me? And there's different ways people say that this applies to you. Okay, so, and not only that, but this is one of the things that Christians, your Christian friends will be like, you think you keep the Torah? You can't keep the Torah. Do you keep the year of release as it spells out in Leviticus 25? No, you don't. And so they'll use it as a way to discredit, you know, the keeping of the law. Anyway, all that to say, yes, you can keep it. We keep it here on our land. You can keep it too. And here's how I go about finding out when is the right time to keep it. Let's go ahead first and read the verses in question, and then we'll get into it. Starting off Leviticus 25, verse 2. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. You shall neither sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. That which grows of its own accord of thy harvest you shall not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it's a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, and for your servant, and for your maid, and for your hired servant, and for your stranger that sojourns with you. Now, there's the commandment, okay? You're going to let the land rest every 7 years, and that which grows on the 7th year, you will not harvest. However, verse 6, you can go out there and pick food that you find, you know, in your field. If things just grow up automatically, you can go out and pick that, but you're not to harvest. No harvesting. Don't go out with your baskets and your, you know, and do all that. No. It's you can go out there and eat and pick whatever you want and eat for that moment, but you can't really, you know, there's no harvesting. So this is also driven home by Leviticus 26 because this is an important commandment. And God says, if you do not obey this commandment, I'm going to spit you out of you're going to be cast out of the land, and you're going to be, you know, living amongst the Gentiles. And that's spelled out in Leviticus 26, verse 34. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate, and you be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when you dwelt upon it. So he's saying, because you didn't do the Sabbaths when you were there, I'm going to kick you out, and then it's going to have its Sabbaths. It's going to have its Sabbaths one way or the other, either with you in the land or with you out of the land. So it's important to him. And then we see this actually come to pass because Leviticus 26 is just a prediction. You know, he knows you're going to be disobedient. He knows your hard hearts. And he says, okay, when this happens, and it does happen, we see this in Jeremiah. Jeremiah makes a proclamation of why we're about to be conquered by Babylon. It's because you didn't obey the Sabbaths. And this is basically spelled out again in 2 Chronicles 36, verse 20, where it says, and then that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept the Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So basically 70 years. It laid desolate to get the Sabbaths. So this is an important thing. I mean, when you think about it, the Shemitah is important. This is one of the main reasons God's list as the reason for kicking his people out of the land, because they did not do this. Why is it so important? Because, in my opinion, this is about faith. You know, the people would get to the 6th year, and they knew they were going to have to not plant the 7th year, and they were like, oh, but we're so low on stocks. I don't know if it's going to be able to, if I'll be able to give that up, that money coming in, and I don't know if I'll have enough food to feed my family, so we're going to go ahead and plant anyway. They had a lack of faith. Because if they had faith, if they would have gone into this having faith, and that's a hard thing to do when you're facing possible starvation and possible loss of income. It's a hard thing to do. That's a hard step to take. That's a step of faith that really, shows you where your heart is. But the people didn't have it. They didn't have that heart of faith. And so they failed. And he says, I'm kicking you out. You have no faith. It takes faith for that. And so how does this apply today? Certain ministries out there will tell you they know when the Shemitah is. All of these ministries that really try to focus on this, or who, and I researched this myself years ago because I really wanted to know, when is the Shemitah? How do I keep this? I want to be obedient. I want to have that faith. And what I discovered is each of these ministries provide exceptional scriptural background for their position. And they provide exceptional historical background and evidence for their position. The problem is they never agree with one another. So I came to the conclusion that I don't know when the real year of rest is. I don't know, if it's the rest that Israel keeps, because some of them say it's not, and some of them say it is. And again, they all provide good scriptural and historical evidence for their positions. The problem is they don't agree with one another. I came to the conclusion I don't know. And then there are those who are saying, well, Zach, this is for in the land. You don't have to keep this. You're not living in the land. Guys, the reality is all of the commandments are for the land. All of them. You will not murder in the land. It's because when the blood, you will not spill innocent blood on my land. I mean, we have verses in the Torah that talk about that. See, all of the commandments are about in the land. The rest of the pagans, the rest of the heathens, they can live however they want. But see, if they live not according to the commandments, they're going to be cursed for their ways of life, their lifestyles. But see, my people, he says, you're going to be blessed. You're going to be a nation of priests because you're going to be a witness to all the other nations on the right ways to live according to my commandments. And so all of the commandments are for the land. So don't just single this one out and be like, oh, Zach, that's just for the land. We don't have to do that. I disagree. How we did it here on our homestead was when we moved here, we began a count. Because we didn't know, and we came to the conclusion we didn't know. We didn't know the exact time of when the Shemitah should be because of all the disagreements that are out there. We said, okay, we'll just keep a count. We'll begin a count now, and then on the 7th year, we'll leave it as a year of rest. We will not put a garden in. We won't, do our fruit trees or whatever. We won't harvest anything. It'll be it. And so that's what we did. And in fact, it coincided with the loss of my wife, and so I think that was not a coincidence. But, and now we're in a year of new beginnings. So that's just where it's at right now. And that's how we decided to do it. And I think other people have also come to that conclusion that it really is about trying your best. The same way it is with the feast days, the calendars that are out there. There's lots of different calendars out there. Even the Jews will tell you the Hillel 2 calendar is not really, accurate. So what do? You try your best. You put forth the best effort, and the father says, okay, these are my kids. They're trying their best. And this is what we see in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Let's read those verses. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord thy God has driven you. Why did he drive them to the nations? Again, he drove them to the nations because of their failure to obey his commandments. One of the big ones being the Sabbath rest of the year, the Sabbath, the Shemitah. Verse 2, and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice. See, they're obeying his voice when they're not living in the land. They're living outside the land among all the nations, and they begin to obey his voice. And see, one of the ways you can obey his voice is by keeping the Shemitah. Okay, according to all that I command you this day, you and your children with all your heart and with all your soul. Then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity, the captivity of you being in the nations, and have compassion upon you, and will return and gather you from all the nations where the Lord thy God has scattered you. And so, and then it goes on to say, from there I will fetch you. And that's what I believe is happening today. We're beginning to obey again. We're coming back to the Torah, and we're realizing that these commandments were valid yesterday, today, and forever. He says, I change not. And we see the disciples and Paul all keeping the Torah in your New Testament over and over again. They're defending the Torah. And they're railing consistently on man-made doctrine, man-made laws. man's laws versus God's laws, the traditions and doctrines of man versus the commandments of God. Mark chapter 7. So, that's what we have here today. We have a whole bunch of people who are living in a land foreign, and they're beginning to obey, and they want to figure out the Shemitah and how best to keep it. Why? Because they have a heart and soul for our Creator. That's really what it comes down to. They have a heart and soul for our Creator. And so the question comes to me, Zach, when's the Shemitah? When do we keep it? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's possible for Zach not to know things. Again, I'm not your pastor. I'm not your guru. I'm not a teacher. I don't like being called a teacher. I'm a commentator. That's it. I'm a commentator. And I'm telling you right now, is my comments, my opinions are that you do the best you can, because that's what any parent wants of his children, to try to be obedient, to seek out obedience and to try. Even if you're going to mess up, even if you fail, there should be an outward appearance of trying to be obedient. And even if you don't get it right, the parent's not going to discipline you for not getting it right if you're trying, because he can always correct you in a loving way. But when there's outright disobedience and rebellion, he lays a smack down. That's what a parent's supposed to do. That's what the father does. We see it all the time with his people. Outright rebellion and disobedience, smack down. Trying, but still messing up, grace. And that's what it's all about. You're never going to be able to keep things perfect. You're never going to be perfect. But see, when you try, there's grace. When you outright rebel and disobey, smack down. Okay, as it should be. All right, so people ask me, how do you keep the Shemitah? I keep the Shemitah the best I can. I give my land, when I begin my count, on a time, I give it a time of rest. If you don't know, feel free to follow along with one of the other ministries and do it the way they say to do it. If you are on a piece of land, feel free to maybe start your count whenever you got there and then go back and do that. But the point is to try. If you try, I think the Father will bless your obedience, your attempts at obedience. Faith without works is dead. I don't work to be saved. I work because I'm saved already. All right, we'll leave it at that. Go home, read your Bible. Thanks.